So we want to, Lori, we want to get ourselves set up and not.
Everyone be aware, we are live, we are streaming.
Yeah.
We don't, it's kind of like when Susan or whoever, you guys start your meetings. So we're streaming live now.
Mhm.
Yeah. So going forward, like if you have an executive session prior to or post council meeting, you'll want to make sure that everyone is in, the waiting room, or when you're done, that you've put people back into like a waiting room and stop the live streaming, obviously, when you go into executive.
So what we were thinking and talking about for the council, at least for the council's purposes, probably use a different platform or log out and make a separate meeting invite for the council so that there's no chance of accidentally getting in, because then it would be password protected. So we would set it up
Yeah.
as a separate meeting, and we would know obviously when we were posting that it would be posted as an executive session. So for us, we don't handle that. I think administratively that way, we would have a separate login for the council with a password for the executive session.
Yeah, so that makes perfect sense, Colleen. So when we were talking yesterday, when we were like testing out some of the features, you can set up a template. So maybe we set up a town council executive session template, and in there we make sure the streaming to, Facebook or any of that, YouTube, all that is off, and we password protect it. So that way, we make sure we don't go oops and we have the wrong meeting associated with an executive session.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Abel. So when everyone gets, when they clicked on the link to this meeting, they're dropped into the waiting room, and we have mute and video off, I believe. Definitely mute off. You're muted. And then when you get dropped into the meeting, you're muted, and then you can, obviously the council, the staff, we need to allow them to obviously unmute themselves. And so if you're in the Zoom link and you're on one of these tiles, you just click unmute to unmute yourself.
Got the ability. So actually what we can do when we get everybody on, we can go through and sort of do a screen share, let you see what we're doing to manipulate the tiles, the mute, the unmute, and just get a general sense of what the environment is here.
Okay. So can I ask right now, are we ready to start? We have a few minutes before 3. So this right now, this time is, town business being conducted, right? This time is for the council staff to kind of get themselves set up, unmute, mute, play around with it, make sure that you're all good to go. Right, until Susan would start the meeting at 3 o'clock, whatever the meeting start time is. And then we would let anyone that is in the waiting room. So there are folks right now waiting in a separate room, so they don't see or hear anything. Kind of like sitting in the foyer until you open the doors to the chamber, so to speak, right? So
Who are the folks waiting at this point? I see. Student. I do.
And so I don't know, like Abel, Deb, do you all see? We don't know how familiar you all are with the Zoom platform. So, right, every platform has its own nuances, but we want you all to make sure that you have the ability to obviously unmute yourselves first of all. But then if you take your cursor and go to the bottom of the screen, you should see some options, and then there's a participant, manage participants, and I'm wondering if you all can see. If you click that.
Look, Colleen, why don't we do a
I see
screen
it all.
share so we can actually see what you're pointing at? It's nice to see everybody's face, but if we're going to be pointing people to points on the screen, we ought to just show them the screen. Can you do that?
Okay.
Do you want me to do
Do you want to do that?
that? Okay.
I mean, I can do it, up to you, however you want to
I'm
do
going
it.
to share my screen now.
Okay.
And I'm going to minimize this one, and we're going to do tiles. So it's a full screen.
Can I ask Lori a technical question? I close out of my email because when I get my email, it kind of pops up a little notification. So I thought to not be distracting, so I just closed out my email. Does that means I won't get any of those pop-ups, correct?
So actually, my share screen is not going to let me manipulate the software at the same time. Oh, there's my menu. So this is typically down below. I don't know why this got moved around, but everybody on Zoom ought to have this menu bar. So this menu bar on the bottom of your screen allows you to.
So Rob, we're only
Yep.
seeing your Outlook reminder.
that's not-
Usually when you go to share, it'll pop up in case you have dual monitors or you have several programs open.
Yep. we
So
don't
you
have that.
just have to make sure you click on the right one because it is streaming. I can see that on Clerkbase. I have that on my phone right now.
Okay,
So I can stop you from sharing if you want,
I can do that.
or you can stop yourself. It is 3 o'clock, so I don't know if we want to just open the meeting. It looks like there are 7 people. Oh, Bryant, we need to let Bryant in. There are a few people waiting out there.
We should admit all. It is an open meeting at this point.
Yeah, I can call this work session with South Kingstown.
All right. Did someone just allow everyone in?
I did not. I don't know if I would have that ability.
They're all in, and
It
it's,
is 3 o'clock, so I don't know if we want to just open the meeting. It looks like there are 7 people. Oh, Bryant, we need to let Bryant.
I think this meeting has officially started, for whatever it's worth. If we could begin recording it and let everybody in, let's do that.
so everyone is now in the room and the meeting is opened.
Great. So here to begin with, we're just going over some of the technical details about how this Zoom platform is going to work for us for our public meetings in the near term. Rob, or I don't know, Lori, whoever is sort of managing our technical experience here, could you just sort of go over the basics?
So the real basics about Zoom are that it is a video teleconference software platform. The platform does not require the users to have a native software package. If you open the link that comes in an email invitation or the hyperlink embedded in the agenda in our case, or embedded in any document that you're working with, that automatically activates your participation in the meeting referenced in that hyperlink. So it's a pretty seamless and simple application for the user. The control of the meeting is really done on the back end. There's a set of tools that allow the moderator of the meeting, the host of the meeting, to mute and unmute participants. Right now, the setting that we're using is that all participants come in muted. So everybody who comes into the meeting is there to watch the meeting at this point, not to participate as a voice in the conversation. That is not true for the council members. The council members are unmuted, with the exception of Rory, which we can actually see. Rory right now is muted. That may have been his choice, and every council member has got the opportunity to control whether or not they can be heard through the platform by clicking on the tile at the upper right-hand corner. If you drag your mouse to the upper right-hand corner of the tile in which you appear, a little dialog box will pop up and you can mute and unmute yourself. You can also control by clicking on the ellipse next to the word mute You can control other elements of the software. You can stop showing yourself. So I'm going to do that to demonstrate how that works. And you can rename yourself. Right now, my name on this program is R. Zarnetsky, which happens to be my email address, but I can change. I'm not going to bother. I hit that mute too quick, didn't I?
Hey, Rob?
Rob,
Yes.
before you continue, can we have the clerk take the roll? Because the people participating by audio may not be aware who from the council is on the call.
Thank you.
Okay. Council President Collins,
Here.
Council Vice President DeCruz,
Here.
Councilwoman Kelso,
Here.
Councilman McEntee,
Here.
and Councilman Veely.
Here.
Okay, let it be noted, all members are present in this video conference.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I should have identified myself when I spoke, Assistant Town Solicitor Amy Goins. And that's one thing we all have to get used to. At the very least, the first time someone talks, but really best practices every time you speak, identify yourself.
It's a great point because the platform, as you can see from the tiles on your screen, includes both people who are using video to participate and folks who are not participating via video, maybe because their computer doesn't have the capacity, or are participating only by phone. And while there is an application that can be downloaded that allows you to view the meeting on a smartphone, many people will be joining on a phone line that is a landline or that is not a smartphone and therefore can't show a video. So we should get in the habit of using our names before we speak. Or as is pretty routine, the chair can, when giving the floor to a participant, make sure that the chair mentions the name. But it's important for us to just identify ourselves so the public can know who we are.
Rob, I have a quick question. When I came into the meeting,
You just muted yourself, Bryant.
mute.
You're good now.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't mute myself for some reason. When I came into the meeting originally, there was already quite a few people in the meeting. Had the meeting started already? Because I was actually sitting out in a lobby waiting for the meeting to start.
Yes, there is a waiting room. So everybody comes into the ante room, the waiting room, and the doors to the meeting are opened and those people are admitted into the room. You were in the ante room or in the waiting room before the meeting. It is possible, depending on the timing, that the meeting technically had been started. Does anybody recall when Bryant was let in the room?
We let him into the room right before we started. And
Okay.
so this is one of those things, right, that we're going to work out, that the council, the staff, solicitor, town staff will, and the co-hosts will be in the room, like in the chambers beforehand, getting situated, getting ready. We're trying to work that out. We're thinking that the attendees, the members of the public who are going to come to the meeting will go to the waiting room. And then when the meeting is just about ready to begin, we can admit everyone and then start the meeting. Susan can start the meeting in the live stream. So those are some of the things that we're trying to work out today. We want to make sure that Amy Goins, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, right? But we want to let the council, the staff get their laptop situated. No council business is being discussed. It's just getting set, right, before your meeting. And then as we get more and more proficient, we can admit people, as soon as we need to, but certainly the meeting will, before it starts, we let everyone in. And then we can open up, I think, a setting, we can open it up so then we'll just drop people in as they arrive. They don't have to sit in that waiting room. Susan can start do the roll call and go from there.
Let's think about that going forward, because I want the user experience, the public experience, to be as much like an in-person meeting as possible, given the platform. And so if you're coming to town hall, the doors are open whenever they're open. I usually get there a few minutes before the meeting starts, but if the doors typically open 15 minutes before the meeting starts, I would say let everyone in the actual meeting room. I don't know if there's I think we started recording when the meeting started at 3. It's pleasantries, right? The meeting shouldn't begin until it's the time noticed on the agenda. So let's think about the use of that waiting room function going forward.
Yeah, agreed. I don't like the idea of having folks stuck in an anteroom.
Well, we called it a waiting room, but yeah, no, that's a very good point. So you open the doors, everyone can kind of come in and you all are getting themselves situated while people are getting themselves situated. That makes perfect sense. That's a good point.
So the only other question I have, we'll try and work this out. Rob, when I came in, you were talking about the fact that the council people wouldn't be muted. I came in, I was muted. I had to unmute myself, which is fine, not a big deal. But I don't know, how do you do that in terms of making sure that the council is able to speak? Technically, someone in the audience could unmute themselves, right, and start talking.
So actually, we're using a module from the software platform today that is a little bit different than what we will be using going forward. Right now, we're in a meeting using their language here. This is a meeting. Going forward, we'll actually be setting up our meetings as webinars with the panel being the members of the town council. That gives you a different set of tools. You won't be muted when you come in as a panelist at the webinar. It creates a bifurcation between participants in the meeting. This module that we're using today doesn't do that. We're still working through some of the licensing issues with Zoom, which is why we're in this format. It's not radically different. For most users, it's not going to look different. It's not going to feel different. You're just not going to have that experience as a panelist. Whereas you did have that experience because all members coming into a meeting, the setting where we've got, are muted automatically.
And one more quick question. I know like in Microsoft team meetings, you can put a presentation up. Can you do the same thing in Zoom?
Yes. So we can put up all sorts of things like a whiteboard where we can doodle. We can put up a PowerPoint presentation. We can put up, anything that's on anybody's screen. So the answer is yes, and that's actually one of the nice features about the software. We will be able to present images to the public at town council meetings and at planning board meetings, at zoning board meetings that are crisp and clear and clean presentations, as opposed to some of the presentations that get published through the system in the chambers now. It's quite often the case that the images being projected onto the live stream under our current physical system are not very good. The graphics gets downgraded in the presentation to cable access, and even the live stream degrades. This will be a cleaner presentation platform for those electronic documents and presentations.
So Rob, as I'm, chairing the meeting and say we get to a portion for public comment, how am I gonna know who is asking to speak? Will I get a notification like around their little thumbnail, or what will that look like?
So there's a feature built into the software that lets people well, there they are. There's
See Wayne with a.
Wayne has raised his hand indicating that he wants to speak.
How did he do that?
So actually, I'm going to let Wayne explain. Wayne?
Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
All right. On the bottom, if you scroll over to the bottom of the tile, it will show a bunch of icons. And to the extreme right, there's a thing called reactions.
Okay.
You click on that and there's a thumbs up and there's a hand up.
Great.
So if I can just interject for a second, it's a little different from what the panelists see versus what an attendee would see from the public. The public, if they've joined through the webinar, through the Zoom client, whether it be on a phone or a desktop or a laptop, they will have an option to raise a hand. If they're on a phone, they can do a *9 to raise their hand. So if those of us that are set up as hosts, we will see to the side that someone has raised their hand. As a panelist, you don't need to raise your hand. So like Laurel, if you see, just raised her hand. I can lower her hand. I can set up to unmute her to allow her to speak during, the public comment section. So what we've seen at some of the other communities is that the chair or the town clerk will recognize, saying that, the council recognizes if the name says Laurel Clark or if it has a phone number, and they'll recognize that person to speak at that point. And then when they're done, they can mute them back again if needed.
And so we should work on, for future meetings, getting that information, like how to raise your hand, whether you're on the Zoom app or just on phone, included in the agenda itself, because we want to make sure everyone understands that.
Yeah, and we will be putting together, actually been working on it, we'll be putting together a cheat sheet so that you've got it, Abel, and the other members of the council have got it, so that you can read up on it and sort of be familiar. We're trying to get it to be a simple, straightforward set of instructions.
And depending on going forward, if we decide to use that waiting room, I did put a welcome banner in the welcome room with the town seal. And I did say that if you're using the Zoom client, you can click on the raise your hand button to be recognized during the public comment, or that you can do a *9 if you're participating only through a telephone. But in both cases, if I'm connected through the Zoom client and a telephone like I am right now, I can raise my hand with the *9 if I'm a member of the public.
All right.
The only other thing I was thinking about, because it happened the last time I spoke, I think right afterwards, the Zoom stopped responding. But I think for some reason it could be that everyone in my neighborhood must be on Cox Communications that I use, because it said that my internet service was unstable.
Right, so I'm a little worried about that. I'm worried about, someone's internet. What are we going to do? What is the protocol if someone's internet goes down, a member of the council or the manager or someone we're interested in? What happens during the meeting if my Cox connection is no longer running?
One of the nice things about this platform is that we can access it via telephone. So really, if my internet went down, I could dial in and be back up in just a few minutes. I think it's, to Amy's point, going to be important for us to make sure that the public knows that they have that option as well. If something happens during the course of the meeting and you are dropped, your internet connection breaks or what have you, you can always rejoin us by calling the numbers on the agenda.
Okay.
So Rob, are we planning to carry out all of our meetings going forward this way until things clear up? Or are we going to suspend council meetings after we pass the budget?
We cannot have a council meeting under the current guidance of no more than 5 people in any one gathering. We already have too many people in the room. Unless Susan and I and Mike were to join you virtually and the 5 of you were to get together, it's not possible to comply with the current executive order and have a meeting. So
the urgency to have these meetings telecommunication wise like this is so that we can pass our budget by the date that our charter calls for? Is that why we're doing this?
No, I think that it's really, we've got to have a tool for doing any business that the council has to do. For example, the local emergency declaration ends on April 13th. I'm sorry, April 15th. You've got a meeting scheduled for April 13th, and you're going to have to decide whether we're going to continue an emergency order on the 13th. So there's other business. It's not just the budget that needs to be done.
Okay.
Rory, I just think this is the new norm for now until we get clearance on we can meet again in person.
Yeah.
But I do feel that regardless of the number of how many people we're meeting, if it's 5 or 10, we're better off not meeting. Do you know what I mean? Because all it takes is one person out of the 5 to potentially.
I just feel like the only urgent thing at this time is we need to pass the budget by a certain date. Other than that, I think that we should should consider at least suspending all council meetings going forward, other than for the purpose of doing that, and continuing the emergency declaration, as you mentioned, Rob.
The governor's executive order allowing remote meetings rather than in person as required by the Open Meetings Act requires that the public body be meeting for an essential purpose. So that's exactly it, Rory. It has to be an essential purpose, which is either for continued government operations, keeping the bills paid and the lights on and, well, no trash pickup, but something like that, town services that are essential, or action that's necessary to meet statutory or regulatory deadlines. So the agenda should really be limited to just the essentials, because the idea is this is a substitute for in-person meetings that allow for full public participation. So you're right that it should be limited to only what's necessary.
Hey, Amy, though, I think when the governor initially, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I think when the governor initially put this out there with the OMA, I don't think she planned, well, I think she was looking at like a 2-week period. So maybe it's possible if this is going to go on a lot longer than 2 weeks, that that's going to change.
I got an email yesterday from the Division of Statewide Planning, which I think is part of the Department of Administration, indicating that the governor would be issuing further guidance on that executive order soon. I haven't seen it yet, and we'll obviously pass it on as soon as we get it. But so that is to be determined at this point, whether it's going to be extended, modified, clarified, that's all unknown.
So I'll also point out that this technology has some real advantages that we'd like to figure out how to incorporate into physical meetings once we're back to doing physical meetings. The software that goes along with this platform creates a record of the meeting. It records the meeting. It transcribes the meeting. So we have a text copy of what's been said during the meeting, which in theory could save us a whole lot of hassle when we're putting together meeting minutes. It could potentially, we're not there, we haven't experimented with it enough, but could, for example, eliminate the need for a transcriptionist at the zoning board meetings. We really see some potential here. Again, presentations of documents, the presentations of electronic files this way are going to be neater and cleaner than anything else we've had available to us in the past. It doesn't necessarily replace live broadcast to the internet or replace cable access broadcast, although at this point it does because the cable company is still not open for our meetings. But this is an actual, this may actually be an upgrade, not just a coping mechanism. It may be better than that.
So I agree. I just have a couple of questions. In the past couple of days, I've read a number of articles about Zoom bombing, right? So I'm hoping the platform we're choosing, the webinar platform, as opposed to this meeting platform, has built-in precautions against that, because there was a lot of unsavory antics happening in the middle of people's meetings, people joining meetings, and some rude kind of stuff going on. So I'm just hoping our webinar platform will caution that from happening, will prohibit that.
Yeah, the Zoom bombing is the result of a setting that people weren't being careful about.
Correct.
We read the articles too, and we
Okay.
make sure that we've got the setting right.
Okay, great.
So Rob, so it doesn't have to do with password protected meetings versus not unpassword protected meetings?
Lori, you can help me out. You've looked into this a little deeper than I.
Sure. So one of the things that was an issue was allowing chats to happen, that people can Zoom bomb via the chat functionality. So as Rob indicated, we disabled that from the get-go. The other thing is you can put passwords on any of these meetings. My concern would be if we put passwords on them, that you might curtail public participation if they can't find the password or so forth. So one of the things we were doing with that waiting room, which was kind of nice, is everyone would come in and then folks who are hosts can pull those people in very quickly in case they join later on in the meeting. And we're also able to keep everyone on mute when they come in. So they do have to raise their hand to speak. If for some reason someone is using inappropriate language or being disrespectful, we can basically remove them from the meeting and not allow them to rejoin. That's an option as well, to protect folks that are being potentially unruly.
Good.
Yeah.
So Lori, I have a question. Because I know we're trying to work out the kinks. Someone could come into the meeting. We don't know everyone that lives in town, right? Technically. And they could raise their hand and put up some questionable material in the middle of a meeting. Is that correct?
So they're not, attendees are not allowed to share their screen. So they could not put something up that was, an inappropriate image. And they can't do that through the chat function either, which was something that a lot of folks had problems with during Zoom. One of our fellow communities here in Rhode Island had a problem with the chat functionality. So live and learn, and we've learned from that. So we've shut that off. So they can't share their screen. That's only folks who are considered panelists, which would be the council, and if Colleen or Susan as host or co-host, or Rob say that we're going to turn it over to Wayne Pimentel or Kayla if she's getting up doing a presentation. So that's an option that we can allow other people to do that, but the public coming in as attendees cannot do that.
And then one last quick question. When the public is on this meeting, I'm assuming that the video is on for them as well, potentially, if they choose that option?
So if they're in, they have multiple ways of being involved with this meeting. They can be watching Zoom on almost anything. It's a free appliance. You don't have to create an account or anything like that. So they can have it on a tablet, a phone, a desktop. They can also still go to Clerkbase, which is what they're used to, watching it streaming. I'm watching it right now on my other phone to see what's happening. And I will tell you, there's about a 15-second delay on Clerkbase. Just so we're aware of that, if people are tuning in that way and then they want to join in with public comment. And then they can call purely on the telephone and join in that way as well.
So from time to time, people will come into a physical meeting with like something they want to hand to us. I guess they should be directed to send it in via email if they had some prepared remarks or some type of handout.
Right. Although, again, Lori, to the point that Bryant just made, anyone who is entering the room with video capability has the ability to Zoom bomb. They can print whatever they want and put it in front of their camera. And, you know, that message gets out there. We do have the ability at that point to shut off their video. We can exclude them from video presentation. It's as if somebody walked into the public town, the physical town hall and pulled out, you know, an offensive placard in the audience. We'd ask them to put it down, and we'd ask them to leave the room. Here, we can actually just shut off the video feed.
Right.
And we can also remove them immediately if we need to. I mean, maybe, and that's a thought, right? You shut the video off first and then remove them, or do you remove them right away?
The first thing that needs to happen is a warning. Give them the opportunity to take down the frowny face picture. And of course, nobody's going to be thrown out for showing a frowny face. But, you know, with the General Assembly out of session, the ACLU has all eyes on the local, on the towns. So let's not give them any excuses. Let's, you know, try to respect the First Amendment. I know we will, where I don't think we're in the habit of tossing people from meetings. So I think we have appropriate protections.
Should we put up some kind of a warning, though, that something like that could happen in a meeting? I'm sorry.
That's not necessary, in my opinion. You already published the rules of the council rules. I believe there's a reference to disorderly behavior in there. I don't think it's necessary to publish a warning specific to this platform. The rules are the same as they were before.
And Amy's point there is really important. I mean, all of the rules of the council, all of the Robert's Rules of Order still apply here. The chairman still has the authority to maintain decorum as he would in any other meeting. The speaking rules, it's a little more difficult because it's easy to just jump into the conversation. But in theory, every question should be going through Abel. Mr. President, if I may, Mr. President. Here it may be more difficult because it feels like this is a more informal structure, but maintaining that order is going to help us have better meetings.
Break out my personal gavel.
There you go.
Abel could call for whether or not there are people waiting with their hands up, basically, to speak, and direct myself or Colleen, whoever's going to be managing the hosting, to allow people to speak. I'm assuming there's going to be an order in which they will be sitting, waiting to speak, and then we can allow them to speak each their turn.
It would be great if we had some way to see when exactly people raise their hands in order, or if somebody was there sort of monitoring that. I can tell just by looking at this, like you can see maybe 20 people who are in the meeting, but then about half of the people on the call are off the edge of the screen. So I won't be able to catch everybody at once who's raising their hand.
So if I can suggest the host or whoever the co-hosts are going to be, if you click on that manage participants down at the bottom of your screen, for those of us that are the co-hosts and panelists, you should be able, a little pop-up window will come to the side where you can see all the folks. And if someone raises their hand, you'll see that to the side. But it may be something that you want to have one of the co-hosts kind of keep track of rather than a council member, only because it may just slow down the natural process of the meeting. I don't know if we would like to have someone test that now, if they want to try and raise their hand, a member of the public. So I just saw Kayla raised her hand.
Does the council see the participant list?
Not all of them.
See that list over on the right if you click on participants.
Yeah,
You do. Okay.
yeah, you have to kind of scroll through them.
Zach, could you raise your hand?
So we've had a couple of people raise their hand.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay, so if you raise your hand, you go to the top of the list there. So that's helpful.
You get, right, you get in line, so we'd be able to see who's in line to speak. That's
Yep.
helpful.
That works.
And then at that point, whoever is the host or co-host would need to, recognize the person before they speak, unmute them. And the attendees also have the capability to lower their hand in the event that they hit it by mistake, and say that, they don't need to make a comment at this time.
All right, everybody.
So then, Abel, then you would call for public comment, right?
So can
Yes.
we run through that right now? Can we get someone to make a comment?
Let's get some,
Raise their hand and let's give it a try.
I think right at this point, I don't have the ability to unmute people.
I do.
Okay.
I can do
so-
that. If I can tell you right now, if you call for public comment, I can respond to you that Kayla Gray is the first person waiting to speak, and you can direct me to unmute her, allow her to speak at this time. So
All
if you
right.
want to do that, I will do that right now.
Sure. Is there anybody who would like to make any public comments at this point? I see Kayla Gray has raised her hand. Could you unmute Kayla?
I can. Kayla, you should be able to speak, but it's not working. How come?
It's working now.
Okay.
I think I had to unmute myself as well. So
Oh,
that's
okay.
sort of a second piece I think people should be cautious of is there's a lot of ways to mute and unmute in here, and there's sometimes the host can unmute you, but if you are, for example, hitting mute on your physical cell phone, Zoom won't override that. So in this case, I, for whatever reason, I believe had to unmute myself in Zoom as well as being unmuted in Zoom. That's the breadth of my public comment.
Thank you, Kayla. I see that Laurel Clark, would you like to make a public comment?
This seems to be going well. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I think so. I might recommend, and I don't know if you guys already discussed this, that if you're doing a waiting room or whatever, you can change the name of people coming in. So you don't necessarily just see a phone number or that kind of thing. Because I think that could get confusing if you're just seeing a bunch of phone numbers. And I think, Rob, you kind of mentioned that you can rename the participants as they're there. And that's my comment.
So I think when we set up the meeting, as you all, the council comes in and the solicitor will, you can either rename yourself or will, Abel Collins, council president, so that we identify everyone on the labels. That's for the people that, well, either watching right at Clerkbase or people participating in the video part of Zoom. If you're calling in by phone, you obviously don't see it, which is why it goes to Amy's point of identifying when you're going to speak.
So if a member of the public wants to speak and they have a video capability enabled, will we see them?
Yes.
yes.
Because the last two participants obviously called it.
Probably not. The
that's-
platform for the webinar will have attendees. You don't have, attendees traditionally just listen, and then when it's public comment time, we unmute them and then they can come forward to speak. So there is no video.
Actually,
So
we
we
have
wouldn't see them.
I think,
a member of the public who's actually quite an expert in this, on this platform, who is in the queue to speak.
Great.
Jamie Murdoch.
I will unmute him right now.
Since this is a regular meeting, I can unmute myself or you can mute me. I think in webinars, you can see, so this is meeting mode. In webinar mode, the benefit of that is that the panelists have superpowers. I think you guys know this. The panelists have the abilities to unmute themselves all the time and mute and unmute. an attendee has to raise their hand and then by the host be unmuted, and that would put them out in video also, I believe. And for an attendee to present or to be able to unmute themselves on the fly, you'd have to change their role from attendee to panelist, which the host can do during the meeting. But normally the panelists would be staff, council members, any witnesses, any lawyers, applicants, you know, that are probably have business before the town board or before the council, and that somebody in the audience would be really blocked from unmuting themselves until the host unmutes them. I did have another comment, and this is something I didn't check out with Zoom, but as somebody can walk into the chambers anonymously, you see their face, but you might not know their name. They can just walk in and sit down, attend a meeting, listen, and walk out and leave. Whereas even the phone callers, many of the phone callers, I see the full phone number, although I also see call-in user 2. So if callers don't have their caller ID blocked, a telephone caller's phone number will show up. And if somebody wanted to join by Zoom anonymously, well, they could live stream. That's pretty anonymous. But if they want to join anonymously, I don't know how that might work, but it might be a feature that, I mean, it's kind of a feature you have in a live council meeting where you can walk in, sit down, watch the meeting, leave. But of course, if you stand up to speak during public comment, you're asked your name and you provide your name. And so you're not public. So that was the only thought. I think a lot of this is going really well though. So that's my thought. I've been writing down a bunch of notes that I'll send to Rob and Colleen after this, but they're just little ideas and tweaks for the most part. I think this is great.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify one thing. So if someone goes onto our website and uses the clerk-based link, the only thing they can do at that point is watch. They cannot interact unless they call into the phone number.
Well,
That's correct, but that also gives them anonymity. If they want anonymity and they just want to be like they're sitting in the council chambers watching the meeting, that provides them an anonymous opportunity.
So maybe we put that down into the cheat notes for everyone that's going to utilize Zoom or the live stream. The folks that are going to be going online though, they're going to be what, a 15-second delay, Colleen?
Yeah, something like that.
So, Mr. President, I'd like to sort of challenge the analogy of anonymity in the room. I actually think that in a small community, anybody who walks in the chamber stands as good a chance of being recognized as anybody whose name shows up on the screen. We know most of the people who show up in town council meetings. There's the opportunity for anonymity, but that opportunity exists here as well. You've just got to manage how you're coming into the meeting. If somebody wore a disguise, we wouldn't necessarily know that it's John or Bill or Mary Sue, but they've got to wear a disguise if they're known in town. I'm concerned about privacy issues with digital government stuff all the time. This one I'm not too worried about.
Rob, if I may, if folks look at the participant list, you'll see that folks have the opportunity to either have their phone number show, and I believe they can rename themselves. So if you see there's someone that is just call-in user 2, so they can have their name appear, they can have a phone number, they can, they can change it. We can change it as well. I don't know that we necessarily want to do that unless it's a a panelist or someone who's part of the board. But it looks like a number of folks have set their profile, I'll call it, to be anonymous.
Right. I think that's important that we get that out to the public, because I'm certain a lot of folks want to call in and make a comment, but don't necessarily want their phone number published. So I think it's important that we make sure the members of the public know how to do that.
Right, which actually explains or provides a purpose for the waiting room, the ante room. If you are coming straight into a meeting without being in the waiting room and we're already recording, there's a record of that phone number. If you come into the waiting room, you have the chance to change, to edit what you're going to project once you go into the room. So that's actually a benefit to the waiting room.
And is that how the webinar will work as well?
It's how any waiting room would work, yes.
Yeah, and council members, if you just say, initially my tile was showing Lori Ann Fox, now it says IT department. So once I'm in, I can change my name.
Lori, I just changed mine just to try to see what it would look like. It was pretty easy.
Yep, and I see it as, yep, Vice President.
Rob and Lori, do you know if we can enable the waiting room functions, but keep everyone muted during that time so that we can use the functionality but not allow pre-meeting discussion?
For panelists, I don't know. Jamie may actually have more experience with that.
I can't confirm that. I'm pretty sure that that's the way it works, but I'd have to look it up.
I have to play with that.
What was the question again, Amy? I'm sorry, my video was a little choppy.
If
So the
you have, if you have the waiting room enabled, can you disable audio? Can you mute everyone?
Can we mute the panelists who are in the room while everybody else is waiting in the waiting room?
Yes, and
I believe by default you are in the waiting room muted.
No, in the actual room, can we mute the panelists so they're not having conversation before the public comes in?
I believe we can, yes.
Yeah, so
not only can you need to be careful to make sure everybody's muted, because the live stream, I think, is not the waiting room. I'm not sure, but the live stream, I didn't turn it on early
Right,
enough.
so everyone is muted when they enter the room. And so then you can unmute yourself. So there are some options that we do have that we can play around with. One of the things too, we're looking at with the webinar feature, the callers, we think there might be a way so that when callers call in, that they're assigned caller 1, caller 2, because we were on some webinars where there were like 300 people and they were caller 1, caller 2, and so on. And I don't think that they renamed them individually. So we're looking at some of the other features that these webinars have.
This is Kayla. If I may jump in on that, can people hear me?
Yes.
I'm looking at it on the sort of back end on the platform, the login side where we set the settings now. And for the webinars, there's a feature called Mask Phone Numbers in Participant List. And it says basically it will take the phone number that appears there and mask it with a clearly fake phone number, 888-666, like just a repetitive series of digits. The only thing to really know about if we switch that feature on, it then becomes very important for the staff, the town council members, the sort of participants in the meeting, the people who will be doing most of the talking, to make sure if they're dialing in by phone, they're making sure they dial in the key code to tie their phone number to their name, because otherwise there's a little bit of back-end capability that if, say, Deb joined the meeting but called in and we just saw her cell phone number, we could tie that to her name. But if we mask the phone numbers, we lose the ability to sort of do back-end tying names to numbers for people. So it's a good feature for getting anonymity for people in the room. It has a sort of ripple effect, which is we then need to make sure that on the sort of town council member and staff side, we're all very clear about making sure we dial in the key code prompt to tie your phone number to your name, because we would lose the ability to sort of help you on the back end hosting.
Is it a good idea to do that? Because, like, for instance, if someone wants to, is watching and now they're masked, as an example, and they want to come up and speak, they could give you any name they want as to who they are.
There's nothing preventing someone from giving a false name when they show up in person at town hall. So there's only so much we can do on that.
Yep.
I think the benefit I can see in it, and I don't know that the benefit outweighs challenges with it, but the benefit I can see in it is that there is a piece to me that does seem inherently a little uncomfortable about having people's personal cell phone numbers visible to many, right? So if my number showed up as my personal cell phone number and I got up and spoke, I can see that there could be a lot of people who could be jotting down, this is Kayla Gray's personal cell phone number. And that's sort of to me, in my mind's eye, I can see that being something people might be a little uncomfortable about. We do have a tool we could do to avoid that, but it would come with another sort of logistics piece to figure out.
So I'd like to hear from Mike about this, but I think we ought to be using that tool as default. I don't like the idea of creating a public record of a number without full and knowing consent by the folks who are entering the meeting.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree. We should use it by default, and that way it won't be an issue anywhere or for anyone.
And then could I just ask, maybe to that point where we would want to merge a video and a phone number, like Kayla was saying, if a council member called in and had the video, we on the back end can merge the two. So we can also help the council, we can help you all do that. So then that makes sense if we do mask it, so it's caller 1, 2, and so on. We can help the council before the meeting to merge their numbers. Perhaps that is helpful.
I almost think, this is Kayla again, I almost think that's sort of the thing. It looks like to me we kind of get put in an either or option on. We either mask the numbers from the start and every number is masked, and then we wouldn't know that any particular person, any particular caller is any particular phone number. But that's honestly a very small issue. I don't think that that's a problem to be really planning on. I think it's likely better to mask the numbers.
Agreed.
I think so. I mean, the truth is, if somebody hears a comment from somebody whose cell phone number is out there and they disagree with the comment, the last thing we want is everybody on one side of the aisle or the other side of the aisle to just hit that phone number constantly with negative comments. It's just not, it's a bad thing. If you want to publish your number, that's one thing. If we're forcing you to publish it, that's not good.
Rob, one of the things that we wanted to talk with the council about, and it seems like it's fine, is using either headphones or a headset or just their video microphones that are on their town laptops. Everyone seems, at least I hear them fine.
Has anybody had any difficulty with audio?
No.
No, the only issue I had earlier was with my internet connection.
Yep.
No issue here.
I would say
We're good here.
buffering on the video. This
This
is
is
not a
Jamie.
huge deal. I'll find a better spot. Set up.
Who was just speaking?
It's
For
Jamie.
instance, right now.
Most of the audio sounds really good. Colleen is probably the most sort of muddy sounding, probably whatever microphone's in her laptop. The better the audio is, the better the automated transcription will be.
Yes, I put headphones in, but you don't
That
need
made
to
a
hear me.
big difference, Colleen.
You don't need
We
to
can
hear me
you.
normally, so we're good.
Well,
Yeah, we
check
can
the
hear you now.
microphone. Yeah, look at the microphone setting also, where if you hover where it says mute and you lift that, you have options as to which microphone it's using at a time. And you could put on headphones that have a boom mic, and it might still be selected to the laptop microphone because you can choose which mic you use. So you just have to watch for that.
Someone has a guess.
Yeah, then there's that.
Hey, all, I've got a 4 o'clock conference call, so I'm gonna have to drop off very shortly, just so you know why I'm leaving.
So, Mr. President, I will note that most of the folks on this conference call are staff, but there are a couple of folks who don't work for the town of South Kingstown. If you want to ask whether anybody other than those who've chimed in have any thoughts, it might be a good time to wrap up after that.
All right. Yeah, I'm happy to entertain any comments from anybody who's on the call still.
So Abel, yours is saying Abel's network bandwidth is low. Is that something on your end?
I can see that on my end that it says my network is slow. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think it's all these rocks that are around here. Can people hear my audio?
You are
Great.
breaking up.
Not great.
All right. Well, I will make sure to be in a better spot next time.
What do you
and
use for internet? Are you-
I haven't seen anybody raise their hand.
Bad signal. I have like lost them.
Yeah, I did too.
He's dropping off there. So we're either going to need a better Wi-Fi connection or a hard connection to the internet.
I'm using a hard connection right now, and I did have an issue earlier.
Right.
But I'm literally within 2 feet of my router, which was surprising. But then the only thing I can think of is that there's a much higher demand on bandwidth right now,
Right.
especially during the day.
Right. So hopefully it's better in the evening, although Netflix might prevent that from being true. It's hard to know.
Yeah.
All in all, though, I think that this has the potential to work. Although we have a.
I think we have someone that either raised their hand or clapped.
It was me. It was Jessica Spence. Hi. Is there a possibility, like I noticed on Amy's visual, she has a set background. Is there the possibility that we could have a set background for council members, board members, any staff? And if that background is possible, would that prevent, background people, family members walking through the picture or anything like that?
So I don't think that's a set. I think that's Amy's sitting there in her home right now. But to do a background, you can do a virtual background. There's something, we were playing around with it. There's something called a green screen, kind of like they honestly do with the news productions. And then you need to
Yeah,
have-
see, Jay just put one up. Amy
Hi, guys.
has Ursula in tights and is what her background is, so.
So she was, yeah. So I think
Yes.
Jay,
Yeah, Jess, if you go on the left side where the mute button is,
Mhm.
and you click well, this is how I did it. You click that little drop down next to it and the audio settings pops up.
Yep.
And midway down on the left-hand side is virtual background.
so the thing that we were looking, I mean, you can do that. The thing that we were looking at that, Rob, we were talking about that was sometimes if you were to move, turn your head, if you had headphones or something, it, because you don't have a green screen, you get all sort of wobbly, like it's, I don't know, you'll have to look at it, and the council, you can each kind of figure that out if you can toggle it on or off, right, Jay?
Yeah,
The toggle, yeah.
This is Amy. I love the idea of a virtual background for the council members and staff because I think it adds an air of formality. And, you know, for the public, okay, there's something different about the people who have, whether it's the town seal, the town hall picture behind them.
So Jay, how is this being done again? I'm not seeing it.
yeah. How's that one? Is that better?
Yeah, that's nice, man.
If you,
If you go next to the stop video, that little menu arrow.
oh yeah, it's more direct.
I got it. Choose a virtual.
On it, right, it says to virtual background.
If I could jump in here, it's Laurel. So the start video has an up arrow. If you click over in the left-hand corner of the screen, if you click on that, choose virtual background.
Right.
And there's only a couple of choices. I think you could upload your own. So
One recommendation would be what we could do, let's say it's the seal. If every person on the council gets the same seal emailed to them, they can download it and then you can go into the setting when you go to choose your virtual background, you can add that image.
We can do that if the council wants to do that.
I think it's a good idea. I'm not interested in letting South Kingstown into my living room, so I tried to choose the plainest background I could find. But yeah, I think it's a little intrusive to have the whole town, you know, checking out your decor, you know.
Yeah.
And I think it's a distraction as well.
Yeah, if you don't like my valances behind me.
Looks great, but
Deb, may I ask, so you have a virtual background right now?
I do not. I'm sitting against a blank wall.
Okay, because I was going to say you're like Jay, like when you don't have a green screen and you do a virtual background,
You get
it almost
Mark's,
looks like a bad Photoshop job where you're kind of
Mark's presentation. You go look at Mark Healy down at the police department there.
exactly. And so like if you were to hold your hands up and you had a virtual background and you didn't have the green screen, it would be all weird in between your fingers. Like your background wouldn't be crisp. I'm not explaining that well,
It
but
looked different. Like when I was looking at Amy the whole time, hers looked a little odd because it was a picture of a building, I think. Oops.
oh, Amy Goins, yeah.
And I just missed something else.
Having the town seal as a background would make it look like you are in the council chambers where the town seal is up on the wall.
In theory, you could do a photograph of council chambers as the background.
Right.
Let's see if we can pull that off. We'll try to make that work. We can get the seal from town hall with the dais, and that becomes a background. You're sitting in front of the dais, but
All right, we'll send something to the council then.
A couple of thoughts. I turned on virtual background. My average CPU went from 20% to about 28%. I have a pretty fast modern computer. If some of these laptops are struggling with the Zoom call, because you can start to break up, you know, from bad internet, but if your laptop is struggling, you could start to freeze up or Zoom could lock up. So knowing how people's computers are doing during the Zoom call, I'm looking at the amount of CPU. I'm also on the Zoom help page about the background, and it says, due to issues with compatibility with Intel CPUs using HD 620 graphics processors, devices using those processors must use a physical green screen. I don't know if that some of you might have that particular technical limitation or not. So you probably need, you know, it requires more CPU. I'd make sure that people aren't that nobody is struggling with their CPU levels already. Because if they're, if they started this meeting with a lot of open windows or had, 40 open tabs on Chrome, like I often do, that's going to gobble up a lot of memory and CPU and would degrade your performance. And, there's some internet, you might want to certify everybody's internet to be, good enough through a couple of, I'll send you a note, Rob, because I did this for somebody else.
Yeah, it's a good thought.
Yeah.
Jamie, what you're saying is testing the internet speed, especially for the council members and staff.
Yes. So there's a couple of good internet test websites that aren't full of ads. And what you can do is, if you're using Wi-Fi, validate your Wi-Fi speed when you're close to your router, and then walk to your home office. And if it drops from 150 megabits down to 20 megabits, that means most of your packets are getting lost. And even though 20 megabits is theoretically plenty fast, what you've really got is a lot of packets getting lost, and you're not, you're at risk of any kind of interference, making it even worse. So in some cases, I had a friend who was just having a lot of problems. Her router was at one end of the basement and her daughter was at the other end of the first floor. And they were just having terrible problems. And I said, well, take your cell phone, stand over, in the kitchen where the router is, and then walk to your daughter's room. What happens there? And then I gave them an Ethernet cable. They moved the router to the other end of the basement and all the problem was solved. So you might have bad internet only because you're not close enough to your Wi-Fi. And you can just move your Wi-Fi without moving your cable modem or without moving. If you have FiOS and it's built in, that's a different story. But hardwire is the best, but a good, strong Wi-Fi will work just fine.
So example, Jamie, is I'm using, my kids are using my laptops for schoolwork. Those are the new ones. This is a vintage 2013 laptop I'm using that I'm plugged in directly.
Right. And so your internet's fine, but if you open Task Manager and your CPU is like pegged right now, or it's up there, then just some background process could kick off and make a mess or cause you to lock up. And you might think it's internet, but in fact your computer itself is struggling for resources.
And just for the record, the computer issued by the town to Councilman DeCruz is here in Town Hall.
I know it is. I'm afraid to go see you.
It's all Jeremy, right? But my thoughts there. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, any final thoughts on the Zoom platform?
Abel, how'd you get your background to come in good?
I did some experimentation. It took me a little while to upload it. You have to upload it, then download it, and then it'll go in there automatically. I don't know.
Strange.
If I can do it, anybody can do it.
One thing I just tried, I logged in on the VPN.
Anyway.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I logged in on the VPN and this, it just about crashed. The entire meeting stopped. I had to close out of it and you guys popped back up again. So it definitely is significantly sensitive to bandwidth.
Which makes perfect sense.
This is Laurel again. We had that problem with the library when people were using a VPN. It really slowed things down and there was a much bigger delay in freezing.
Yep.
And I don't know about what VPN you're using, but some VPN clients can be configured as to which traffic goes through VPN and which traffic goes straight to the internet. And I was able to do that in my former job to get to prevent my internet, all my internet access from going through the VPN to the company's network, we were able to reconfigure it so that direct, like the Zoom traffic would go directly, but you'd still have a VPN for town network access.
So all of that speaks to the fact that we are going to need to provide some good guidance to the public and remind them that if their internet connection isn't adequate, they really need to be calling in instead of using the internet. And the phone connections are good. I mean, I've used the Zoom phone connection and it's as clear as any conference call I've ever been on, so.
Rob, did we want to schedule something else, or do you want to, we're good for now and go from there?
So the council's next regular meeting is scheduled for April 13th. This would be the first sort of heavy lift meeting using this technology. Would the council like to get together again? Do we want to try sort of working through the bandwidth issues that we've seen today and do some background checks to make sure we've got background checks? Do we want to go through with a shorter meeting? I think in half an hour, we could probably check bandwidth. We could probably check backgrounds for each of the council members. And we could probably, if folks want to decide on a configuration or a convention for names, we could probably go through and make sure that Councilman Rory McEntee is in fact what's showing up on the, or what have you. I mean, we can do those sorts of configurations over the course of a meeting if you'd like to do that. Happy to do that. What's the 13th?
I think it would be a good idea, Rob.
Okay, so why don't we schedule something for the 13th is next Monday.
Oh, a week from Monday.
No,
week.
So we, yeah, so we have.
The earliest we could schedule, we talked about, and Susan would have to confirm, but the Wednesday, if we posted an agenda tomorrow.
Wednesday, the 8th?
Yeah, if we posted an agenda for a council work session, and if we posted it tomorrow, you could meet really Tuesday at the earliest. We could schedule it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Is that correct, Susan?
That would be correct.
So I have no availability Monday, Tuesday, so Wednesday, Thursday's fine with me. I do want to make sure we're meeting on the webinar platform, not this same meeting platform. So I'd like to make sure we have the licensing in place before we schedule the next practice session here. But in the platform we're going to use on the 13th.
Yeah, that licensing, Rob, we talked about, it will be all set by tomorrow afternoon. So we're actually, we will be set before we post the agenda for sure.
So Wednesday, any particular time?
Preferably 5 p.m. or later.
I can do any time on Wednesday.
Okay. Are there any other items that the council would like to discuss at a meeting on Wednesday at 6 o'clock, let's call it?
Maybe a COVID update.
Okay.
Harkening back to Rory and Amy's conversation, we should try to keep most of any type of conversation around policy to our regularly posted meetings in an effort to be as transparent as possible with this. So I would, if we want to have like an organizational meeting where we get all this stuff fine tuned on Wednesday, I would keep the agenda to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd say maybe we could hold off on the COVID update until the April 13th meeting. So maybe keep the work session specifically to the workings of this telecommunication.
But I think that maybe people are more anxious to know what's going on in town. So that would be with the 8th. So we'd have to wait another 5 days for an update from the town. So maybe
So we're already operating under an emergency declaration, which gives the town manager the ability to make decisions at his discretion, which I'm certain we're going to extend at Monday's meeting.
No, I get that. I'm talking about if the public wants to join in for an update.
All right, well, what do the other members feel?
I'd prefer to keep the Wednesday evening meeting to working the bugs out of a webinar. And then hopefully the Monday, the 13th, we can conduct any business we need to conduct. But I'm very concerned about the public's ability to participate in the webinar and their level of comfort, I guess. So I'd really like to encourage the public to call in to next Wednesday's meeting and just say hello and get everyone familiar with the platform.
Deb, I can see your point and I agree with that. I just think that there's a lot of people still kind of like wanting to know, or maybe there's, maybe what we could do or have the town manager do is just put out, a weekly update, via a press release.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably something we don't need to give you any direction on, Rob.
And we've got press releases almost every day. We are trying to make sure the public knows what we're up to. Amy Reiner has been extraordinary about making sure that we keep the public and our employees fully apprised of what's going on. So we'll continue doing it.
Thank you. I was going to ask if there's anything that the council is looking for that they haven't seen to be included in the press. Please let us know, and we're more than happy to get anything out.
Absolutely. Any questions or concerns you're hearing from constituents or that members of council have themselves, we want to know it and we'll get you the best answers we can. Just coming back to the time for a Wednesday meeting, given that we're trying to encourage public participation in that meeting and really get folks to that meeting, do we want to move it back to 7 o'clock so that we're not conflicting with the lunch, or I'm sorry, the dinner hour?
I think it's a good idea. Either 7 or 7:30.
Fine with me.
It's okay with me.
Okay, Wednesday at 7.
Okay.
Well, congratulations. You've run your first virtual workshop.
It was a team effort. All right. Well, I guess with that, we can adjourn this work session. Thank you all for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Bye.